Last week we began drawing our drawing grid that we will be using for our spirit animal project. The grid is comprised of many lines and is all set for us to use as a reference. The first thing you're going to do is find your spirit animal on the small copy paper, and you'll see that the grid corresponds on there with the grid that we drew last class. You will be using this grid to break down your drawing. You can see there's some triangles that are blank, which will correspond with the same triangles on your watercolor paper that you're going to be doing your drawing on. The first thing you want to do is decide, do I need to hold my paper horizontally or do I need to hold my paper vertically? Right now I'm holding it horizontally because my deer is horizontal. If I was doing something like the duck, which is vertical, it's facing this way, so I would have to turn my paper vertically, but I'm horizontal today. So, as I begin drawing, I'm going to recognize that not only am I comparing back and forth, but I'm also realizing that my drawing needs to enlarge. So if I'm starting with something like the nose, I see that it's about halfway down that center line, and it kind of lines up with that X. So I'm going to start my nose here. It is right along that center line and goes a little bit farther to the right of that line before it connects. I will then start to build off of that and into the other areas of the drawing. I can draw the curved line coming off of this and the chin, comparing and contrasting as I go, and move towards the other diagonal lines as a guide. If it goes over the line, my line will go over the line. If it goes into the next triangle, same thing. Everything's getting a little bit bigger as I go along, especially the eyeballs, so that things are proportionately accurate when I complete this. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but you want to try your best to pay attention to those things. Now, these curved lines are pretty easy. We're used to those. It's when some of the textural zigzag lines come into play that students feel a little bit overwhelmed. But they're just zigzag lines. You've been drawing them for years. It's just, are the zigs or the zags bigger or smaller, and do they curve or are they straight or are they angled? So as I begin to add all these other ideas, the deer will kind of start to take shape. It will also be much larger than it was in my original, and I know I'll be on the right track to have a successful composition based on the drawing that I see and the proportions that I have. So skipping ahead a little, once you've finished your deer drawing, I'm going to pretend I'm done, you're going to switch over to Sharpie and you're going to start to outline the lines of your animal. I am being very careful to just outline my deer and to not outline my grid. I don't want to outline my grid because eventually I'm going to erase it. It was just there as a drawing tool to guide me. Anything that is shaded in your original reference should be shaded in your drawing. So I'm going to shade in the nose as I saw it there. Now the key is to have a good Sharpie. If you come across a Sharpie that's a little dried out and it's not really working, please make sure to throw it in the garbage and get a new one. That way your drawing looks nice and neat. Once you have finished the Sharpie, the next step is to erase your drawing grid to the best of your ability. I'm not going to show that in the video, but you're using one of the large erasers from the bins to erase all of your grid pencil lines. Hopefully you drew lightly as I had suggested so that this becomes an easier process. There might be some remnants left on the original grid, but that's okay. Get it to the best that you can. Once you've erased the grid, you're going to start using the watercolor pencil to hatch in areas of the drawing. You can see here I hatched in nice and neatly in one direction. I'm also using my color pencil to add some values throughout the face. I skipped ahead so you can kind of get the idea. Hatching in the same direction, nice and neat, adding those values, adding some dimension to the face. You can add other colors. I used a little tiny bit of orange that's barely showing up on the video to give it a little bit of a warm tone, but you want to get a nice base coat of the watercolor pencil on here before you start oil pastel. Once you have that, you're going to switch to the oil pastel, which has a much better variety of colors. This is a small set of oil pastels. You'll be using a set of 50, so you have a lot of options. And you can start to blend in and add shadows and highlights with the oil pastel. With oil pastel, less is more. You don't want to add too much because you can't take it away. It can't be erased. So I always add in a little bit to the edges or to some of my texture lines or the definition lines in the face, blending a little bit of colors here and there before I start smudging. When I do smudge, I want to put a little bit of paper towel around my finger and start to blend it together. If I think it's too dark, I could always go back and add a little bit of white or peach to the top of that, and that'll soften up the colors and kind of blend them together. This will not be manipulated later by the water, and the watercolor pencil will. It'll change into paint. So that's kind of important when you're thinking about that and how you want to add the colors, to be considering that for the future. You can blend the colors around and kind of complete all of the areas of your spirit animal. Here is it finished just before I'm ready to paint, just to give you an idea of, I blended some pinks and browns in the ear, and I've got this nice yellowy brownish tone going for the antlers, and my deer is ready to be painted. When I add the water, what's going to happen is I want to either use the flat red brush or a round green brush, not too big, and I'm just adding a tiny bit of water, and that's going to allow the watercolor pencil to change into a nice soft paint. This will get it into the crevices of the paper and take that texture out. It'll push away from the oil pastel, and it'll just soften the whole image so that these materials are now working together instead of staying apart. Gives it this nice area. I'm gonna kind of blend them together until I have my finished deer, where I've got these nice soft areas, all my colors. I've washed my brush in between to not muddy my colors, and hopefully I'm happy with the finished result. I tried to stay in the lines as much as possible. We will be trimming this to add it to our background, so if little things happen here and there, don't worry about it too much. If you have pools of water, you can always take paper towel and kind of dab it and get a little bit off. But I'm really happy with how my deer is looking at this point. Thanks.